My son called me on a Thursday evening in early October, and I could tell from the first 2 seconds that he'd rehearsed what he was going to say. "Dad," he started, and there was a pause just slightly too long to be natural. "So, the wedding's coming up fast, and Vanessa and I have been talking a lot about how we want the day to feel. We want it to be calm, no tension, no awkward moments." I was standing in my kitchen, still holding the spatula I'd been using to flip a grilled cheese. I set it down on the counter. "Okay," I said. "Mom's going to be there. And Ted." Another pause. "You know how things get when you two are in the same room." I knew what was coming. I could feel the shape of it the way you feel a cold front coming in before the clouds even show up. "We think it would be better," he said, "if you didn't come to the ceremony or the reception." I didn't say anything for a moment. I picked the spatula back up because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. "It's just one day, Dad. We'll celebrate with you separately. I promise." His name is Oliver. He's 31 years old. I coached his Little League team 3 different seasons. I drove 4 hours every Thanksgiving for 12 years to make sure he and I had our own meal together after the divorce, even when it was just the two of us at a diner table in a town called Millbrook that had exactly one restaurant still open on a holiday. I did that because I believed that showing up mattered. That presence was a form of love you couldn't fake or replicate later. I told him I understood. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I said I understood, and that I loved him, and that I hoped the day was everything he and Vanessa wanted it to be. Then I hung up and stood there in my kitchen until the grilled cheese turned black on one side. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because it would be easy to make myself sound better than I actually was in the days that followed. The truth is, I was angry, not the loud kind of angry. I've never really been loud about much, but the quiet kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to sleep. Past 4 in the morning. I'd lie there in the dark and have arguments I'd never actually have. I'd say all the things I didn't say on the phone. Some of them weren't things I'm proud of. My ex-wife and I divorced when Oliver was 16. It wasn't dramatic. We'd simply grown into 2 different people who wanted 2 different kinds of lives, and neither of us had been paying close enough attention to notice until it was too late to course correct. She remarried 4 years later. Ted is a financial advisor from Scottsdale. He golfs. He has very straight teeth. I don't dislike him as a person. I just find him deeply difficult to talk to, and I think the feeling is mutual, and neither one of us has ever pretended otherwise. Oliver knows this. He's always known this. What he may not have known, or maybe he knew and chose not to say, was that I had already been working around it for years. For his college graduation, I sat on the opposite side of the auditorium from his mother and Ted and didn't approach them once. For his 30th birthday dinner, I came the night before and took him out for ribs and a beer so he wouldn't have to navigate a table that included both me and Ted. I always came early, or late, or to a different thing altogether. I always made it work without asking anyone else to accommodate me. That was the deal I'd made with myself, quietly, years ago. Don't be a burden. Don't create scenes. Just be there somehow. Being told not to be there at all was something different. I called my brother Stuart the next morning. He's 68 and lives in Asheville, and he has a gift for saying exactly the right thing about 15 minutes after you needed to hear it. "So don't sit around," he said, after he'd listened to the whole thing without interrupting. "What are you going to do instead?" "I don't know yet. Figure that out," he said. "That's the part you can control." The wedding was on a Saturday in November, the 15th. I'd had that date circled in my head since Oliver told me about the engagement 14 months earlier. It was a Saturday I'd cleared completely, a day I'd imagined 100 different ways. Where I'd sit, what I'd wear, what I'd say. When I walked down the receiving line and shook Ted's hand and meant it, because it was my son's wedding day, and meaning it would have been the right thing to do. Instead, I woke up that morning at 6:15 in my house in Raleigh, North Carolina, made coffee, and sat on my back porch for a long time, listening to the neighbors' wind chimes. I'm 63. I took early retirement from the civil engineering firm I'd worked at for 27 years. My knees have opinions about stairs now. I eat well. I sleep okay most nights. I walk 3 miles most mornings along the greenway near my house. My life is quiet in ways I mostly appreciate and occasionally find suffocating. That Saturday, it felt suffocating. At some point, I went back inside and looked up the name of a food bank in East Raleigh that I'd driven past probably 200 times without ever stopping. They had a listing on their website for volunteer shifts, and there was one that Saturday from 9 to 2. I don't know exactly what made me do it. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It didn't feel meaningful in the moment. I just thought, the alternative is sitting on this porch until it gets dark, and I'm not willing to do that. I showed up at 9:15, which was late, and apologized to the woman at the sign-in table. Her name was Beverly. She had a laminated badge and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she did not seem remotely concerned that I was 15 minutes late. "You know how to unload boxes?" she asked. "I do," I said. "Then you're useful," she said. "Go around back." For the next several hours, I unloaded boxes. I stacked canned goods. I sorted through donations. Winter coats, mostly, and shoes, and the kinds of miscellaneous things people clean out of closets when the seasons change. There was a man named Terrence who worked beside me most of the morning. He was maybe 75, thin as a rail, and he moved faster than anyone else in the room. He'd been volunteering there every Saturday for 11 years. His wife had started coming with him, and then she'd gotten sick, and then she'd passed. And he'd kept coming because, as he put it, the work doesn't care what's going on with you. I thought about that for a long time. Around noon, a young woman named Patricia came through with a camera. Doing what she explained was a story on hunger in Wake County for a local news segment. She was maybe 25, earnest in the way that young journalists often are, before the industry beats it out of them. She asked Beverly if she could interview a few volunteers. And Beverly pointed at Terrence first, and then at me. I almost said no. I'm not comfortable on camera. I never have been. But Terrence had already walked over, and it seemed rude to duck out. Patricia asked me how long I'd been volunteering there. I told her it was my first time. She asked what had brought me out on a Saturday, and I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was tired, or because something about the morning had loosened something up in me. I told her the truth. Not all of it, not the details, but the shape of it. I said my son was getting married that day and I hadn't been invited, and I'd needed to find somewhere useful to be. She was quiet for a second. "That's honest," she said. "It's what happened," I said. She kept the camera rolling. She asked me a few more questions about the work being done at the food bank, about why I thought it mattered, and then she thanked me and moved on. I didn't think anything of it. I went back to stacking boxes. I left a little after 2, drove home, showered, and heated up leftover soup. I watched part of a football game without really following it. At some point, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was dark and my phone had several notifications I hadn't heard come in. There were 3 texts from Stuart. The first one said, "Did you talk to a reporter today?" The second one, sent 20 minutes later, said, "You're on the news." The third one, sent at 10:18, said, "Call me when you see this." There was a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. And there was a text from a contact I hadn't heard from in 4 months, which was Oliver. He'd sent it at 9:47. It said, "Dad, why is your face on the news? Are you okay?" I sat up on the couch and rubbed my eyes and tried to put the pieces together. I found the segment online about 20 minutes later. Patricia had edited the piece to about 4.5 minutes. It opened with footage of the food bank, volunteers moving around in the background, boxes going up shelves, and then there was Terrence, talking about his 11 years and why he kept showing up. And then there was me, on camera, looking slightly disheveled, with a plastic crate of canned green beans in my arms. I heard myself say, "My son is getting married today, and I wasn't invited. I needed to find somewhere useful to be." And then, maybe 15 seconds later, I think the only thing you can do when things don't go the way you hoped is find some way to be useful to somebody. That's it. That's all I've got. I watched it twice. I looked tired. My hair needed cutting. I was wearing an old flannel I'd probably had for a decade. I did not look like someone trying to make a point or score sympathy. I just looked like someone who had shown up somewhere on a hard day and said something honest because someone asked. The segment had been shared quite a bit by the time I found it. There were comments. I didn't read most of them. I called Stuart back. "You're trending in Raleigh," he said, which was a sentence I had not anticipated ever hearing about myself. "I don't know how that happened. You were honest on camera. People respond to that." He paused. "You should call Oliver. He texted me." "I know. I mean, call him." I didn't that night. I wasn't ready. I sat with his text for a long time. "Are you okay?" And I thought about all the different things that could mean. Maybe he'd seen the segment and felt guilty. Maybe he was genuinely worried. Maybe Vanessa had seen it and said something to him. Maybe his mother had seen it and said something to him. I didn't know. And I wasn't sure knowing would actually help me in that moment. What I did instead was write him a message. I typed it out slowly, the way I do, because I was never a fast texter even before my fingers started giving me trouble in the cold. I said, "I'm fine, son. I found a good place to spend the day. I hope your wedding was everything you wanted it to be. I mean that. Get some sleep." I sent it and put the phone down. He replied 11 minutes later. The message said, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I typed back, "Yes." He called at 10:15 Sunday morning. I'd already been up for hours. I always am. And I was on my second cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table where I'd eaten most of my meals alone for the past 6 years. He didn't say hello. He just said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I want to tell you that those words fixed something, cracked it open, set it right." They didn't. Not completely. That's not how it works, and I think anyone who's been through something like this knows that. Words are a beginning, not an ending. But I'd be lying if I said they didn't matter. They mattered. "I watched the segment 3 times, he said. "Vanessa watched it with me the second time." She cried. "Tell her I'm sorry for making her cry on her wedding day." "She's not upset," he said. "That's not. She's upset at herself. At us." He went quiet for a second. "It was her idea, Dad, not to invite you. I want you to know that. And I agreed to it because I thought it was the path of least resistance, and I was wrong." I thought about that phrase, path of least resistance. I understood it. I'd taken that path myself, plenty of times. It's just that the path of least resistance has a way of leading you to places you didn't mean to go. "I know you were trying to make things easier," I said. "I was trying to avoid a thing that might not have even happened," he said. "You and Ted, you've never actually. You've always been fine when it mattered. I've tried to be. I know you have. I've always known that. I just." He stopped. "I think I took it for granted. That you'd adapt. That you'd understand. Without thinking about what that was costing you." I didn't say anything to that. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't either let him off the hook too easily or make him feel worse than was useful. We talked for almost an hour. It was the longest phone call we'd had in probably 2 years. He told me things about the wedding, what the venue had looked like, that Vanessa had worn his late grandmother's pearl earrings, that his best man had given a toast that had made the whole room laugh, and then gotten very quiet at the end. I should have been there for those things. I wasn't, but I was hearing about them now, directly from my son, in his own words, and that was not nothing. Before we hung up, he said, "We're doing a small dinner next Saturday. Just close people. Would you come?" "I'll be there," I said. "Vanessa wants you there. I want to be clear about that." "Okay, and Dad," he paused. "That thing you said, about finding somewhere useful to be. I've been thinking about that since last night." "It wasn't a statement," I said. "I was just tired and a reporter asked me a question." "I know," he said. "That's why it got to me. We have not repaired everything." I want to be honest about that too, because I think these stories, the ones where people share something painful, sometimes skip too quickly to the part where it all works out. And I've never trusted that version. Life is longer and messier than a tidy ending. There's still Ted, and the particular silence that fills a room when he and I are in it. There's still whatever it is Oliver and I need to rebuild slowly, conversation by conversation. There's still the fact that I wasn't at his wedding, that I didn't see Vanessa walk down the aisle, that there are no photographs with me in them from that day. Those things don't unhappen. What I know is this: That Saturday, when I drove to an East Raleigh food bank with no particular plan and unloaded boxes for 5 hours beside an old man named Terrence, who'd been showing up every week for 11 years. Through things I couldn't imagine, I was in the right place. Not because of what came after. Not because of the news segment or the texts or the conversation with my son. Just because it was the right use of a hard day. Because Terrence was right, even if he didn't mean to say it to me specifically. The work doesn't care what's going on with you. The boxes need to be stacked. Someone needs to eat. You can still be useful. I drove to the dinner that next Saturday with a bottle of good wine and a card I'd spent too long writing. Vanessa met me at the door. She hugged me before I'd even said hello, which surprised me enough that I almost lost hold of the wine bottle. "I'm really glad you're here," she said. "Me too," I said. And I was. I genuinely was. Oliver shook my hand at the doorway and then pulled me in, and for just a moment, standing in the hallway of their small house in Cary with my son's arms around me and the smell of something good coming from the kitchen, I let myself feel it, all of it. The months of loneliness and the anger I'd quietly carried, and the hard Saturday and the long phone call, and the fact that we were here now, standing in this doorway. Then I handed Vanessa the wine and asked if I could help set the table. That's what I do. I show up. I make myself useful. That part I've always known how to do.